Chapter 29, The Golden Age of Athens. What were the major cultural achievements of Athens? Introduction. At the end of the Greco-Persian Wars, the city of Athens was in ruins. Despite this setback, a great Athenian named Pericles inspired the people of Athens to rebuild their city. Under his leadership, Athens entered its golden age, a period of peace and wealth. Between 479 and 431 BCE, Athens was the artistic and cultural center of Greece. Suppose you could visit Athens during its golden age. Passing through the city's gates, you would wind your way through narrow streets to the Agora, the public meeting place in the center of the city. The Agora is a large square with magnificent public buildings on two of its sides. The other two sides have covered walkways where you would meet and talk with friends about current issues. In the center of the square are market stalls with a variety of goods for sale from all over Greece and beyond. Nearby, you would see the Acropolis, a high, craggy hill crowned with great temples, rising above the city. What information about the ancient Athenians can these places provide? In this lesson, you will explore several important sites in ancient Athens, including the Parthenon. This temple was one of the most famous buildings in Athens, and its ruins still remain today. At each location, you will discover the major cultural achievements accomplished during Athens' Golden Age. You will learn about Greek religion, architecture, sculpture, drama, philosophy, and sports. Section 1. Athens after the Greco-Persian Wars. During the Greco-Persian Wars, the Persians burned Athens to the ground in 480 BCE after defeating the Greeks in the Battle of Thermopylae. Although the Greeks eventually defeated the Persians, the wars left Athens in ruins. Pericles, leader of Athens. From about 460 to 429 BCE, Pericles was a leader of Athens' government. One of his chief contributions was to direct the rebuilding of the city. Pericles promoted constructing many public and religious buildings, including the Parthenon, the most famous temple in Athens. Pericles believed that Athens was a model, in culture and in government, for all the Greek city-states. While the leader of Athens, he encouraged creativity in all of the arts, including music and drama. He was an avid supporter of democracy and created reforms to encourage its growth. He believed that all citizens had an equal right to participate in government. Under Pericles' leadership, Athens paid the salaries of men who held public office. This enabled poor men, who would otherwise have been unable to afford to leave their jobs and farms, the opportunity to serve in government positions. A city of contrasts. Ancient Athens was a city of great contrasts. Although the city's public spaces and buildings were large and stately, many people lived in small, uncomfortable houses that lined narrow streets. Most homes in Athens were 1 story high and constructed of mud bricks. The homes of poor families were very simple, while the wealthier people had large, more elaborate houses with rooms surrounding a central courtyard. Athenian houses had few windows, so homes were usually lit by oil lamps. The public spaces and buildings were the pride of Athens. The Athenians erected large government buildings made of stone around the Agora. On the Acropolis, the hill above the city, the Athenians built magnificent temples as earthly homes for their gods and goddesses. Section 2. Greek religion. The ancient Greeks thought that the gods and goddesses they worshipped resembled and often acted like humans, but did not age and die. Every city-state honored a god or goddess, who was thought to provide its people with special protection. For example, Athens was named for the goddess Athena. The Greeks believed that each god or goddess had power over a particular area of life. Athena was the goddess of war and wisdom. The Greeks placed a colossal or huge statue of her inside the Parthenon, the temple they created in her honor. Another famous temple was in the city of Delphi. This temple was dedicated to the god Apollo. People would visit the temple to ask Apollo for advice. A priestess, called the Oracle of Delphi, would answer their questions by going into a trance. The priestess's words were believed to be Apollo's. The Greeks told myths or stories about the gods. According to these stories, the home of the gods was Mount Olympus, a real mountain in Greece. 12 of the gods and goddesses were particularly significant and are often referred to as the Olympian gods. The Olympian gods and goddesses were part of everyday life in ancient Greece. For example, before embarking on journeys by land or sea, the Greeks would request their help. The Greeks dedicated their festivals and sporting events to their deities. Greek artists decorated the temples with intricate images of them. Section 3. Greek architecture. Temples are good examples of the Greeks' talent for architecture. The Greeks built their temples not as places in which to worship, but as beautiful dwellings for the gods and goddesses. Religious ceremonies were conducted outside. The temples show the importance of balance and order in the Greeks' idea of beauty. Temples were built with rows of tall columns. The Greeks used 3 styles of columns. The Doric column was the simplest, as it had no base and narrowed toward the top. The Ionic column was thinner, sat on a base, and had scrolls carved into the top. The Corinthian column was the most complex, with carvings that looked like leaves at the top. Athenians built 3 temples on the Acropolis to honor Athena. As you have read, one of these was the Parthenon. One of the most spectacular temples in ancient Greece, the Parthenon was constructed on a long rectangular platform. There were 8 columns across, both the front and the back, and 17 along each side. The roof was slanted, creating triangles called pediments at the front and back of the building. Above the columns was a band of sculptures called a frieze. The sculptures themselves are called metopes. There were many different sizes of Greek temples, but their basic shape was similar. The majority had a main room with a statue of the temple's god or goddess. The Parthenon, for instance, had a magnificent statue of Athena that stood 30 feet high. Made of wood, the statue was covered with ivory so that it appeared more lifelike. Then it was dressed in clothes and decorated with gold. Like the temple itself, the statue expressed both the Greeks' love of beauty and their awe of the gods. Section 4. Greek sculpture. The statue of Athena in the Parthenon was a wonderful example of another important Greek art, sculpture. Sculptors in Athens often established a workshop near the site where the finished statue would be placed. Sculptor apprentices initially made a life-size clay model supported by wooden or metal frames. The general outline of the statue was then roughed out in marble, to which a master sculptor added details and finishing touches. Greek statues were colorful. Metal workers attached appropriate bronze pieces to the statue, like spears and shields. Painters applied wax and bright colors to a statue's hair, lips, clothes, and headdresses. Creating lifelike statues was one of the great achievements of Greek sculptors. The earliest Greek statues had been influenced by Egyptian styles. Like the Egyptians, the Greeks created larger-than-life figures that faced front, with their arms held stiffly at their sides. Later Greek sculptors made more realistic statues in natural poses, showing muscles, hair, and clothing in much greater detail. One of the most famous Athenian sculptors was a man named Phidias, who designed the figures that line the frieze on the Parthenon. He also sculpted the statue of Athena that stood inside the temple. The statue carried a shield of gold, with carvings of 2 faces, those of the great Athenian leader Pericles and of Phidias himself. Section 5. Greek drama. In addition to architecture and sculpture, the ancient Greeks excelled in drama, the art of the theater. Attending the theater was a regular part of Athenian life. The theater of Dionysus in Athens could accommodate thousands of people. Dionysus was the god of merriment. Greek plays developed out of the songs and dances that the Greeks performed at harvest time to honor him. As Greek playwrights improved their art, they began to write plays that told stories. The plays included a few main characters and a chorus. The chorus was a group of men who recited lines that commented on the actions of the main characters. The words spoken by the chorus helped explain and expand on the story. There were no women actors in Greece. Because men played all the characters, both male and female, actors wore masks. The masks were decorated so that the audience could easily see a character's emotions. Plays were staged in open-air theaters built into the sides of hills. A Greek theater was shaped like a bowl so that everyone could hear what was said. The seats rose in a semicircle around a stage at the bottom of the bowl. Scenery was painted on canvas and hung behind the actors. Plays were often a form of competition that could last for days. Judges selected winners in 4 categories: tragic playwright, comic playwright, leading tragic actor, and leading comic actor. The winning writers and actors were crowned with olive leaves and awarded prizes such as figs. Section 6. Greek philosophy. Athenians, like other Greeks, loved to talk and argue. In the sheltered spaces to one side of the agora, men often gathered to discuss the world around them. They talked about nature, often exchanging ideas about the natural world, such as what it consisted of and how it functioned. They also discussed things they couldn't see, such as the meaning of life, justice, truth, and beauty. This kind of thinking is called philosophy, which means the love of wisdom. One of the greatest philosophers in Athens was a man named Socrates, who encouraged people to question the very things they thought they knew. He taught others by asking them such questions as, what makes a good life? What is truth? How do you know? In this way, he led his students to consider their beliefs. Even in Athens, where people welcomed new ideas, this constant questioning brought Socrates into trouble. His enemies accused him of dishonoring the gods and of leading young people into error and disloyalty. In 399 BCE, Socrates was brought to trial for these crimes. In defending himself, Socrates declared that he was the wisest man in Greece because he recognized how little he knew. The jury found Socrates guilty and sentenced him to death. Although friends encouraged him to escape from Athens, Socrates insisted on honoring the law. He died by drinking hemlock, the juice of a poisonous plant. The example of Socrates inspired many other influential Greek thinkers, especially his student Plato. In turn, Plato taught another great philosopher, Aristotle. Section 7. Greek sports. The Greeks' interest in philosophy demonstrates how they valued the mind. Their love of many kinds of sports shows that they also prized physical fitness. The Greeks often held athletic events to honor their gods and goddesses. In Athens, games were held as part of a festival called Panathenaea, which honored the goddess Athena. The high point of the festival was the procession, or solemn parade. The Athenians attached a new robe as a gift for the statue of Athena to the mast of a ship and pulled it through the city to the temple. The Panathenaea Games included many events. There were horse races and chariot races, including one event in which men jumped off and on a moving chariot. Men also competed in foot races. In one race, men ran in their armor. Additionally, the games included combat sports, such as boxing and wrestling. In an event called the Pancratium, men were allowed to punch, kick, and even choke each other. The event ended when one fighter surrendered, lost consciousness, or died. Another set of games to honor the god Zeus was played every 4 years at Olympia. Called the Olympics, these games were so meaningful to the Greeks that they would call a truce from all war so athletes could travel safely to the games. Lesson summary. In this lesson, you explored major achievements in ancient Greek culture during the Golden Age of Athens. Athens after the Greco-Persian Wars. Pericles was a great leader who promoted both the reconstruction of Athens and the growth of Greek culture and democracy. Greek religion. The Greek worship of gods and goddesses was part of daily life. Athens was named for the goddess Athena, and the Parthenon honored her. The temple at Delphi honored the god Apollo. The Greeks told myths or stories about their many gods. Greek architecture and sculpture. The temples on the Acropolis in Athens were examples of the Greek talent for architecture. The lifelike marble statues created in workshops displayed the art of sculpture. Greek drama and philosophy. Athenians enjoyed dramas staged in large open-air theaters. Only male actors performed. The Greeks also enjoyed discussing philosophy. Socrates was one of the greatest philosophers in Athens. Greek sports. The Greeks competed in athletic events at the Panathenaeic Games and Olympics. Events included races and combat sports.